So, for the next one, what I'm going to try to do is, I always feel like atmosphere is clearest when it's actually backlit. So I wanted to flop the sun direction and put it behind those buildings, just to show a bit of that atmosphere, and also play with exposure.
Yeah.
See how that might adjust everything. So I just started way back there and just started painting in the light in the background.
Oh, wow, cool.
And you can start to see already, like, I'm trying to figure out how atmospheric it is back there by the sun. This is probably a little still too contrasty.
Yeah.
So I start to brighten it up a bit.
And that's the thing that, you all have to remember that the atmosphere color is caused by the light. Even including the sky blue is caused by the light. So, basically you're playing with the color of the atmosphere here, but mainly because this either morning or sunset, the sun is right behind it.
Yeah, so if you look at it now, it's kind of similar to where we were with the cool painting. Like, I got an overall kind of warmth in it and everything, but again, it's about that transition of coming from where that atmosphere is far away from us and all the way to kind of working towards the foreground. The foreground I've kind of left as a dark shape because I know overall it's going to be darker, but it's still not quite as atmospheric as I think it would be if the light were shining into the lens like this. But I'm just kind of working on that transition in the midground of the cityscape.
Yeah.
And again, trying to be really loose and just indicate. I don't want to draw individual buildings so much as just indicate them.
That's cool.
And so here I'm using adjustment layers overall to create a bit of atmosphere coming over.
Because the light is looking towards the camera, that there's more influence even if it's in the close by.
Even if it's close by, absolutely. If the light is shining right into our eyes or this kind of... and you can go out there and see this actually. It's not just in cameras, but you can actually see this effect.
Yeah, because... it's a combination of the atmosphere and the bloom effect that we talked about in the lecture.
Absolutely.
That's influencing. So it's when the light is, pointing towards your eye or the camera, it has a greater influence to what you're seeing, including the objects being close by.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you can see here, I'm actually struggling to figure out what the right level of atmosphere is. Yeah. On that building, and trying to gauge how far is that building actually from us, and how much atmosphere is coming between us and that object. And so that's kind of feeling pretty good to me overall. And I'm getting this is where a bit of that bloom is influencing. Yeah. On that far edge, the light is influencing the shadow over there. So you can see I'm building from almost the background towards us a little bit, and adding atmosphere in the appropriate levels as we get closer and closer to the camera.
So it doesn't flatten out completely.
Yeah, exactly. And trying to just retain, like everything, I like to break it down into steps. So if I'm thinking about atmosphere and lighting, I like to deal with atmosphere and lighting like that, where I'm applying it to objects as it comes closer and closer to camera, so that I'm organized about it, and so I don't cheat too much. Yeah. And so even the pig, I put a bit of atmosphere. This is probably a bit heavy, and so I'm just erasing back out of that kind of atmospheric layer that I put on top of it to get back some of that value, but even then keeping it fairly simple, fairly true to what the painting was underneath, the drawing was underneath.
Yep.
And just getting a bit of light on him.
And then I'm noticing the hits of lights on top surface, like the top of the buildings and stuff like that. That's just the light kind of shining through the atmosphere we talked about.
Yeah, it's like reflecting off of the top of buildings. Yeah. That's why it's not universally everywhere. We're at the right angle to catch it, is what I was thinking, to catch a reflection off the tops of these buildings. So it's actually the light source being reflected. Yeah. And then that light source is being reflected strong enough in a way that it's cutting through the atmosphere. The light is penetrating through that atmosphere is what I was thinking. Yeah, and you can see here just really kind of struggling with getting that character to sit just right, you know, and getting that foreground to sit just right. So, I mean, and this is something, you know, I wanted to keep in the video too, is like the struggles.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like it's always just one hit and it all works. But that's kind of generally what it is. And here I felt like, oh, it's feeling good. If the light were shining right into the lens like this, it's probably very likely we'd be getting some sort of lens flare. And lens flare is almost usually the kind of the shape of the aperture or the camera hole, I guess. And so I did this kind of circular aperture, almost as a compositional element, sitting in there.
That's cool. You painted the lens flare, so it doesn't look mechanical against your paint.
Right. You know, and I think lens flares, I'm always sheepish about them because they can get to be very cheesy.
Yeah.
But I do feel like when you're looking into a light, it's almost strange sometimes if you don't have it.
Right. In a way, like uncomfortable, or at least just you want to look away.
Yes, absolutely. And you can see here, like, you know, I'm really playing with the temperature of that Griffith Observatory, because if you remember, I did paint it at overcast diffuse light, but it was cool overcast diffuse light. And it was sitting a little too cool in the composition. And so I went ahead and backed off on the coolness and warmed it up a bit.
I see.
And when I say warmed it up, I actually pushed it towards neutral, not like I pushed it towards orange.
Yeah.
So yeah. And that's kind of our low-lying fog version of LA. Not a very common sight, actually.
Yeah, that's cool.
And let's do one more. You know, I thought, okay, well,
yeah.
We have this kind of overcast, low-lying fog, but what about LA on like a rainy day? So I was just trying to think of how to quickly get a kind of alternate setup using what I already had there. And so I went ahead, darkened the whole scene, and even pushed back even more, kind of got some value shifts in the sky, these thunder clouds, kind of dark clouds over LA. And this was really fun to paint because I was trying to get, you know, using loose brush strokes, abstract patterns, but trying to get a sense of scale and space in the clouds a little bit, which was really fun. And then just getting a bit of that light catching on those shadows that are sitting in front of this giant cloud overhead. And then also little tiny lights down below so the city doesn't kind of die away, but also it's sitting not only behind atmosphere, but also not even atmosphere, rain. I think it's rain that is sitting between us. Layers and layers of rain, which is very similar to atmosphere. It has a similar effect.
Yeah, pretty much, because it's the particles.
Yeah. And Pig was a bit dark, so picking him out of that darkness there. You know, overall, this is feeling pretty good to me. So from there, I just start, you know, okay, I want to see some of this rain in the foreground. So I just put some layers of kind of rain there. I just
very subtle.
Very subtle. Yeah, very subtle. And then this is actually the important part: is actually painting reflections into surfaces to get it to feel like all the surfaces are wet. And so that's basically what I'm doing: is painting reflections onto upward-facing surfaces.
Yeah. This is a really important part: painting reflection versus like. Highlights. I mean, highlight is a reflection, but oftentimes in this kind of situation, I can imagine a lot of us just painting highlights to make things look wet. But the problem is, without having a light source, like a singular light source, you wouldn't have this kind of a generic highlight. Yes. So that's why having a reflection like you did is the way to convey that it's wet.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, right? If you were like when I was a kid, I always used to draw symbols for like reflections, and they'd always be like streaks or hits of white light. And you're absolutely right. That's very much a symbol versus a reflection is literally a mirror on some level. It's just a matter of the surface quality of that reflective surface. But so I'm just painting reflections of dark and light. So I'm actually using rather than light, using darks to kind of show the reflection.
That's awesome. That definitely gives very different feelings, huh?
Yeah. Using atmosphere, those are, several different feelings. Cool. Shall we move on to the next atmosphere down? Lighting atmosphere, other things down?